for most of my life. In fact, if you looked up the definition of a New York capitalist in the Oxford Dictionary, you'd probably find my photo. So what I want to try and explain and give you some perspective is, how I have used Jain principles, embraced Jainism, and used it in my professional and personal life, and how it has helped me become a bit more peaceful, happier, and content. And the hope is, me who I used to define myself as a New York capitalist can embrace Jainism. Hopefully a lot of you that may have a similar background or similar interests can do so as well. So the first perspective I wanted to offer was, we as a generation pride ourselves on being open-minded and liberal. A lot of us truly believe in the concepts of being liberal and open-minded. Yet the irony is that most of us, myself included, are extremely close-minded towards learning more about Jainism. I can say for myself, I've spent pretty much my whole life actively avoiding even learning about Jainism because I was guided by a belief that if I learn more about Jainism, I'll stop having fun in my life. It's only now that I know that belief was so misguided. I decided to embrace and learn more about Jainism when my sister decided to take Diksha 4 months ago. The reason I did that was, again, it was not to learn about Jainism, but I felt as a brother I should try and understand what my sister has gone through in the last 5 years and the kind of life that she'd be leading going forward. And it was through that lens that I began to learn more and more about Jainism. And I can honestly tell you that over the last few months, and I'll describe it a bit more in detail, I have seen tangible benefits within my life of opening my heart and mind towards Jainism. And for me, it has helped me develop a belief that the teachings of Bhagwan are an indisputable truth. Our generation has a very hard time believing that the teachings of Bhagwan are the indisputable truth. I genuinely think the reason why we have such a hard time believing that is because we actually don't know anything about Jainism. None of us have taken the effort to learn about Jainism, because if you think about it at the root of it, Jain philosophy is actually completely consistent with logic and with leading a good life, as my good friend Rahul Shah, who's in the audience today, explained to me yesterday. The second perspective I wanted to share was this concepts of fairness, equality, and justice. All of us believe in that. Some of you believe in it so much that you devoted your careers to it. But once again, the irony is that if you truly believe in the concept of fairness, you wouldn't do half the things that you do. We have in our life, as my sister mentioned, if you believe in fairness and equality, you must believe in this concept of what you give is what you get. And that's the concept of karma. So therefore, by extension of logic, if you believe in karma, and if you believe that you are the source of violence, your very existence is the source of violence to many others, you will obviously get nothing but violence in return. The tragedy is that we define our universe of nonviolence solely in terms of human beings. We don't seem to extend that definition to include other organisms and souls such as animals, bacteria, and microorganisms. And that goes to my first point. If you truly believe in equality, how can we be so arrogant to assume that human beings are superior to other forms of life? Because in the eyes of God and Bhagwan, all souls are equal. So therefore it goes by extension again of logic, that if you believe in equality and if you believe in fairness, again, how can you be so arrogant to assume that if you perform acts of violence towards other forms of life, that you will not receive anything but violence in return? And as my sister mentioned, the 3 biggest forms of violence that you can perform to non-humans are, number 1, eating meat and eggs, number 2, consuming alcohol, and number 3, using animal products. I think the third perspective I wanted to offer is that even if you believe that you should be non-violent only to human beings, to no other form of life but just to human beings, I think there are 2 perspectives I'd offer on that. The first of that is to say that, acts of non-violence begin at home. It is a bit inconceivable for me to assume that you can serve society at large and you can promote peace and non-violence in society at large. But if we can't do that with our own parents and family, if we can't treat them with respect and we can't serve them, I'm not sure how we are. If we're unable to do that at home and bring happiness at home, how are we actually going to go about and serve and bring happiness to the broader society? The second aspect of nonviolence I wanted to talk about, till now we've spoken a lot about physical aspects, physical nonviolence. But actually most of our nonviolence is mental, through feelings and emotions of anger, greed, lust, as well as jealousy and envy. And to me, all of those aspects are just as important as the physical aspects of nonviolence. And particularly, I'm working in New York City, you very often encounter those feelings. And those feelings are typically encountered in a place where you feel you have been wrong. It's always typically when you feel you have been wrong, when life has been unfair to you. I think my biggest learning from my sister was that life is never unfair to you. Again, if you believe in karma, you give what you get. So even though you believe that in this life you haven't done anything to deserve what you get, you've probably done that in a previous life. And so if you go with that mindset, you then won't blame others for your source of unhappiness. And I read this book called The Jailer with my sister that literally changed my life. And the concept of the jailer is quite simple. Essentially, if you have a criminal and you're sentenced, you're given a sentencing by the judge. The jailer is someone essentially who carries out that sentencing. Is somebody who may whip you, for example. So as a criminal who has been given the sentence by the judge, are you actually going to be angry towards the jailer, or will you actually be unhappy or angry towards the judge? The jailer is just carrying out his or her duty. The judge is the one that has handed down the sentence to you. And this simple philosophy, if you turn it and talk about it in the law of karma, the judge is karma, the court of karma. The person giving you anger, unhappiness, or jealousy is simply the jailer. They are simply the medium through which your karma has been transmitted to you. And I think it took me a while to realize and appreciate this concept, but if you do, you will begin to react negatively, or your feelings of anger, greed, and jealousy will subside, because you will realize that the person who has in your mind wronged you, a boss who has yelled at you, a colleague who hasn't listened to you, or a spouse or a boyfriend or a girlfriend who has done something to give you pain, they are simply jailers. It is not their fault. It ultimately is your fault because of something you have done in a past life to deserve it. Again, it's just taking the natural logical extension. If you believe in karma, if you believe what you give is what you get, therefore, it only makes sense that what you've gotten in this regard is actually what you may have given in the past. And so I think all of these philosophies have helped me do a few things which I'd like to talk a little bit about in terms of, I think, what you guys can hopefully also begin to implement starting today. I think the first piece is just to be open and don't be closed-minded about Jainism. Just embrace Jainism, learn a little bit more about Jainism, make the effort, and a variety of avenues and medium available to you to do that. The first I would say is, perhaps read a Jain book. Read The Jailer if you want. It changed my life for sure. I have a PDF copy, so I'm very happy to email it to any of you who are interested in perhaps reading this book. The second is to perhaps listen to some Jain lectures online. And I think the third, if you have the ability to, is to go attend a Jain Diksha. Because it is such a beautiful occasion that I can guarantee you your soul will feel enlightened once you're done with it. On behalf of my parents, I invite all of you to come to my sister's Jain Diksha, which is next January. It's during MLK weekend, so it's an opportunity to come. But again, if you can't go for that Diksha, make an effort or mentally think through if you can go at some point in the next 2 years to attend the Jain Diksha. The second thing I would like to say is, we all believe in investing for the long term. A lot of us work hard in college so we can get a good job after college. We work hard in our first job after college so we can get into a good graduate program. And then once we work hard in graduate school so we can get a good job after that. So we always believe in investing in the long term. The challenge we have, I think, as a generation is our definition of the long term is very short-termish. We only think of the long term as the next 50 years. If you believe in afterlife, why not think about the long term as the next 10,000 years? We seem to limit our definition of the long term solely based on the life we are going to lead in this existence. But if you truly believe in investing for the long term, and this is something that Warren Buffett talks about all the time, why not expand your definition of the long term to include your afterlife and millions of years after that afterlife? The way to start investing in the long term, I think, though, is through short steps. It's impossible for you to go from 0 to 100 in one day. It is impossible for me to reach where my sister has immediately. And if I put that unattainable goal to me, I will be nothing but frustrated. So it's important that you all think about this as starting through a series of short steps. Hopefully those short steps you feel, and test yourself, right? If you feel better after implementing those short steps, you feel happier, you feel more content, then make those short steps a series of bigger steps. And pretty quickly those short steps won't seem short steps at all. And I have 5 short steps that I have tried to implement. It has given me a lot more peace and satisfaction, so I'd like to share them with you. And you should choose if those make sense to you or not. I think the first short step I would say, which is something I never used to do in any case, but I've stopped completely, is eating meat and egg. There is no way that if you believe in Jainism, if you believe in karma, if you believe in fairness, you believe in equality, that you will continue to eat meat and egg in any form. If you don't want to be eaten by a human being in your future life, stop eating meat and eggs. The second I would say is to stop drinking alcohol. Many people assume that drinking alcohol will be a source of happiness and contentment towards themselves. As my sister mentioned, there are a variety of role models for whom that is not the case. Some people believe that drinking alcohol will further your professional career, or if you don't drink alcohol, you will stand out and stick out like a sore thumb. I can categorically say, based on my experience, and I have a few colleagues of mine from work here, it has not in any way harmed me in my professional career by not drinking alcohol. So if that is the rationale or the reason for why we should drinking alcohol, I'm living embodiment of that, not having actually been an impediment to me. The third piece I would say is, as my sister mentioned, minimizing the use of animal products. It is very hard to give it up immediately, but you can certainly implement certain pieces where you can minimize the use. I think there are 3 I'd like to share. The first is your wallet. So many of us have a wallet. It's been leather. It's in our subconscious. We don't really care if our wallet is made of leather or not, but we just simply use a leather wallet because that's just how it is. But what if you change your wallet from a leather wallet to a vegan wallet? I made this change 3 or 4 months ago. It has made no discernible change to my life. Nobody noticed my wallet before. Nobody has noticed my wallet now. And it literally has made no difference whatsoever to me, but it's made me feel a lot better about my choice. So for those of you who use a leather wallet, there's absolutely no reason to change this leather wallet into a vegan wallet even tomorrow. The second is a leather belt. Once again, with winter coming, who's even going to look at your belt? Nobody looks at your belt. Typically you're wearing a sweater on top of your belt. Nobody's going to care about the belt you wear, and least of all you. So why not just change your belt from a leather belt to a vegan belt? And then the third simple suggestion that I've tried to implement is vegan toothpaste. Toothpaste that you have right now has gelatin or it has some sort of animal bone. You switch to a vegan toothpaste, my mouth doesn't stink anymore. I'm perfectly normal, and it makes me feel a lot better about my choice. I think the fourth piece I would say is you're transitioning from physical nonviolence to mental nonviolence. As I said, it's very easy to blame others for our situation when we feel angry, when we feel jealousy, when we feel greed. It's very easy to blame others. But if you truly believe in the law of karma, you will realize that you shouldn't actually be blaming others. It's because of what you have done that you are going to get what you deserve. And that feeling of negativity needs to be replaced by positivity. And the first path towards moving from negativity towards positivity is to try not to badmouth or speak ill of people when they're not present. And the test for whether you're badmouthing or speaking ill of people is, would you actually say that same exact thing if that person was in your company? If the answer is no, don't do it. And this is, again, as you move from negativity to positivity, you will feel better inside. You can't control how you think, so you might still feel negative or negative emotions about different people. But if you can control with what you speak, that is a humongous first step. And I challenge each of you that if you start doing that even for a week, you will feel a lot more at peace. And the last thing I would say is, hopefully this is only the beginning. And Mehul, if he's around, one thing I might request him is if there are a handful of you who are interested in learning more about Jainism or what Jain philosophy is all about, and sharing that with a group of like-minded people, perhaps you can even reinstitute the experience my sister had 6 years ago, which is maybe once a month a few of us meet at the temple to share our thoughts and begin to talk a little bit more about our Jain principles and how we may implement that. So in closing, thank you very much for coming. My sister's journey began 6 years ago when she met a Caucasian male who taught her about nonviolence. I'd like to think my journey began 4 months ago when I learned from your sister, and hopefully all of your journeys begin today by attending this talk. I would definitely say that by attending this talk, you at least have demonstrated to yourselves, more importantly than to anyone else, that you do have, no matter how innate it may be, you have a latent desire to learn more about Jainism. I'd also very much like to thank my friend Christina from work, her boyfriend Matt, for making the effort and having the courage to come attend this conversation, even though they're not Jain, and probably the only two non-Indian people in this room. So thanks very much for coming. And thank you once again, all of you, for coming. Hopefully this is the start of the journey for you. And now, any questions for my sister? Maybe say a little bit about yourself, your name, where you're from, what you do.
My name is Janesh. I was born in India. I came here when I was like 5 years old. Ever since then, I've been living here. Just very simply, our religion is a minority in our own country. I think every year the number of Jain people are getting less and less. So in light of that, don't you think that maybe Diksha is something for later on in life, after maybe you have family? So children of different cultures and values.
So I definitely don't see that because I guess it's really not it doesn't matter how many people are Jain, even though there might be a lot of people born into Jain families. I think it's more important how many people have belief in Jain philosophy. And my guru, before I came to America, he told me it's not, it doesn't, if someone invites you over to speak or something like that, it's not, don't worry about how many people you impact. Even if you impact just one person, you've done your job. So it's really not about converting people or getting more people interested. It's more about whoever is interested, rather conveying the truth and having them understand what the truth is and living the truth myself, rather than getting a lot of people involved. And also Bhagwan Mahavir in his Keval Jnana has seen that there is going to be a drastic decline in nobility, in virtues as time passes on. So to have an expectation that a lot of people should take to this philosophy is unreal, and I don't have it. Secondly, my whole goal is to free myself from the cycle of birth and death, to liberate myself from sinning, to liberate myself from hurting other people and practicing more non-violence. And I think that's my only goal. And in the process, if others benefit, that's great. But at this point, my goal is to purify my own soul rather than spreading the word. I hope that answers. I just have a very clear.
Nishaben, thank you very much. My name is Viraj Mehta. Well, the question I want to ask you is that the step you have taken, it's really amazing, and everything that you're telling us, has been more or less about, the immediate future. But what was your experience like from that 5 years ago when you left your job till the day you decided that, okay, I really want to pursue this? As most of us are, we're always worried about relationships, about making money, about so many other things. How was that going for you when you were going through all those things? Were you still, quote unquote, living a normal life? Or had you already moved beyond that in that 5 years and if so, just kind of talk about your experience.
So I guess since I quit my job, in that sense, I wasn't living a normal life. But obviously, I didn't change internally overnight. Externally, I might have made a lot of drastic changes in my life, like not being driven by money anymore, or external success, or not basically striving for appreciation or attention and not letting that be the driving factor in my decisions or in my But of course, it's something that happened. I mean, my focus changed, but I didn't change overnight. Like my goals and my priorities changed, but of course, I did struggle internally, in the sense that my first struggle was, when I stopped, necessarily dressing up or not. I basically stopped, being so conscious of the physical world, not caring about so much about the clothes I wear, the brands I carry, and also quitting my job and living in India. And when I was in India, in fact, I used to wear a sari when I stayed with the Satmijis. So a little bit, I still had that little bit of self-consciousness in me, and I used to think, what would my friends think if they saw me like this? So that is something that I did struggle with. And of course, then living with the Satmijis, it's a big change in terms of your physical environment. So adjusting to the physical hardships was also a little bit of a challenge, but because I was so determined from within, I think I was able to overcome that. And of course, with the support and love of my guru and her guidance, that was the main reason why I survived. Living there without, missing home or without missing the material world, it was her amazing ability to understand me, understand where I come from, and help me with whatever negativity I was struggling with within. I mean, she was just unbelievable and really able to understand me really well. So that was my biggest she was my biggest emotional support and inspiration. And I think living there, I just mentioned all the negative aspects in terms of physical hardship and such a drastic change in my physical appearance and quitting my job, but there was so much positivity also being in that environment, which constantly attracted me to go back there again and again. Just seeing understanding the people there, understanding what drives them, what their sources of happiness are, and how independent they are from the material world, how they're constantly spending every moment of each day trying to grow internally, and that's where all their energies are focused. Before I was also constantly striving for external growth and external success. But once I started living with the Satmijis, my focus was totally changed within, and I was constantly looking to grow internally, which basically means I was looking to get rid of all the negativity within me. Whether it means my attachment to material things, my need for my egoistic needs for attention, whether it was my emotions of jealousy, or whether it was all the my nature to judge people. She constantly helped me to grow internally, and that in turn gave me a lot of peace and joy, and that experience always attracted me to go back. And that was basically what I did in those 5 years. But in terms of changes, of course, there is a period where you question yourself. You see, your friends in the outside world going in an opposite direction. And every time I came back to America and I used to see my brother working, I sometimes used to question, am I doing the right thing? Or as I said, I used to get conscious about, what do people think of me? And that was a little bit of a struggle for me to overcome those feelings. But I think eventually I started developing so much faith and so much conviction in what I was doing, and knew that this was the only path that would give me that eternal fulfillment that I'm longing for. It was the only path of compassion, and it was the only path that would make me feel good about being alive. It was the only path that would give purpose to my life. And so then as I started developing more faith in what I was doing, those negative emotions of self-consciousness or even the physical hardships, they no longer had any importance. I guess, I don't know if I answered your question, but hopefully I did.
Hi, my name is Mohan, studying economics here. I have a question about spending money. Why do we spend so much money building temples and in ghee bolis and just in a lot of Jain occasions? Why do we need to build more and more of these? why can't instead you use that money to like help eradicate poverty or something else? I know people, we still do that, but why is there so much emphasis on building more temples and spending more money behind like just different occasions?
So, obviously, giving money is a form of charity. And as you mentioned that spending money on building temples, why do that? So I can say for myself, had the temple in Queens not be there today, I don't think I would have been able to bring about this change in my life and go in such a positive direction and make such a positive use of my life. So that temple and those murtis being there in Queens today has been the reason for me taking this decision in my life. And me taking this decision is not only going to impact this life of mine, but it's going to impact many more lives to come. It's going to impact everyone around me, everyone connected to me in such a huge positive fashion. And the entire purpose of Jain philosophy, Jain religion of Bhagwan Mahavir wasn't to just give someone temporary happiness. He wanted to make someone happy forever. And the only way to do that is by practicing, as we discussed, practicing non-violence, by basically inculcating virtues within us and getting rid of all our negativity ensures happiness in this life and many lives to come. Because it stops us from creating the negative karma and only building positive karma, and therefore many lives to come it ensures happiness until we ultimately reach the state of moksha, which is eternal happiness. Now if you give a poor person food or give him clothing, he might get a temporary sense of relief which will last him maybe for a day, a year at the most. But once again, he's going to sink back, maybe you may eradicate his poverty forever, but that is still only temporary, it's only for this lifetime. But true charity is the charity of wisdom and the charity of right belief. And by building temples, you are giving people the opportunity to connect with Bhagwan and what he said, and in changing themselves for the better, for the more positive, which will ensure peace and happiness not in this lifetime alone, but for many lives to come. So investing, I'm not saying giving money to poor people is wrong, but donating money towards building a temple is equally, in fact, more important according to me, because as I said, had this temple not been there, would I have not changed my life to this extent. So I think everyone benefits from going to a temple, and the more temples there are, the more people are being impacted positively, and they are being impacted in such a manner that they can improve not only this lifetime, but many lives to come until they ultimately reach the ultimate state of happiness.
The only thing I would add is, it's not an either or. So you can obviously still contribute and give back to society, and yet that may be your choice of service. There are many different forms of service. One of them is giving back to those less fortunate than you. The other is to invest funds in building a temple. I think the broader point is also that Jainism tries to espouse is not about hoarding it for yourself, but it's in the joy of giving that we truly experience true happiness. And whether that gift or that giving comes from giving to those less fortunate than you, or giving to a temple, as my sister mentioned, which is far more permanent, that I still think that it's important that you continue to maintain this sense of giving.
But secondly, I just want to add that, we see someone poor and we feel sorry for them. We see an alien person in a hospital bed and we feel sorry for them. And we feel that these physical discomforts and physical diseases are the only causes of pain. But to be honest, true suffering is because of the internal diseases that we have, the internal negativity that we have within. Even if someone is financially secure and has every single luxury and every single comfort, but from within, if they are still internally full of negativity, full of greed, full of discontentment, full of jealousy, they'll still never find happiness. So honestly, by giving someone a physical physical object, we are really not giving them true happiness. It is only through real wisdom that you are giving someone true happiness and lasting happiness. This physical donation of giving food or clothing is very temporary, and honestly it's not going to give that person real happiness. So therefore, it is in fact a bigger investment